The Vraxim scout ship glided through the cold silence of space, its black insect-like frame blending with the stars. Commander Sithril sat at the control station, his claws tapping nervously against the screen. His four eyes blinked in sequence, tracking the strange vessel ahead. It was motionless, floating near the wreckage of a once mighty alien cruiser. There were no distress signals, no signs of life, only static. Sithril leaned forward. "Scan." "A deep scan," he hissed. The ship's scanners hummed and a low pulse echoed through the chamber. The results came quickly. The vessel was human, lightly armored but heavily armed. Every weapon mount was still hot. Inside, no life remained, only signs of fierce resistance and self-destruction. Yet something else drew their attention. A signal beacon, still blinking, transmitting an encrypted message. Sithril narrowed his eyes. "Bring it in. I want to see what these creatures are hiding." His engineers connected to the human ship's data core. After a brief decryption effort, the screen flickered to life. Video footage appeared. A warning symbol in Earth Standard flashed once. Then the footage began to play. For 10 minutes, the room on the Vraxim ship was silent. No chatter, no orders, no movement. All eyes watched the footage. It showed humans in battle, not in space, but on the ground. A front line somewhere deep in a war-torn colony. Smoke and ash clouded the skies. Buildings were rubble, fires raged, but the humans moved like predators, focused, coordinated, and terrifying. Soldiers charged through the chaos, weapons blazing, ducking behind cover, pulling wounded comrades to safety. Massive tanks rolled forward while drones swarmed above like metal hornets. Their enemies, tall beasts covered in scaled armor, outnumbered the humans 2-1. But the humans didn't stop. They fought with grit and fury, never backing down. Some screamed in defiance even as they fell. Others fought with bleeding wounds, refusing to let their lines break. One soldier, barely more than a boy, stood atop a burning wall with only a sidearm left. He faced a charging alien war beast, a creature twice his size. Instead of running, he charged. The footage caught the moment he fired his last bullet, straight through the beast's eye. Both fell at the same time. The recording didn't slow or soften the moment. It didn't need to. Then came the aerial strike. Human jets, fast and agile, sliced through the sky, unleashing precision firepower that wiped out dozens of enemy units. The camera shifted again to orbit. A human warship, battered but still flying, released a final payload. The screen turned white from the blast. When the image returned, the enemy lines were broken, the ground scorched. The humans, bloodied, wounded but alive, stood among the wreckage. The footage ended. The screen went black. No music, no voiceover, just silence. Sithril didn't speak for a long time. His crew waited, some with eyes wide in fear. One officer finally whispered, They were not running." "No," Sithril said slowly. "They were winning." He rose from his chair. His legs trembled slightly, but he stood tall. "Send this footage to the Council immediately. Classify it as Priority 1. "But this is only one battle," the officer said, his voice unsure. "Perhaps an isolated case. Perhaps—" Sithril turned sharply. "You saw what I saw. They are not prey, they are something else." The officer bowed his head. "Yes, Commander." Across the galaxy, the footage traveled through encrypted channels, reaching high command posts, war councils, and predator species who had ruled for centuries. Species who thought they were safe, untouchable. Apex. They had studied humans as a developing species, scattered and emotional. They were believed to be too chaotic to organize, too soft to dominate. But the footage told a different story. This wasn't chaos. It was controlled fury. It wasn't emotion. It was resolve. The humans fought like they had something no other species had, a fire that grew stronger under pressure, a refusal to die quietly. On many worlds, silence followed the viewing. On some, fear spread, and on others, pride turned to doubt. In the command chambers of the Drakari Dominion, Warlord Zalcor watched the footage with narrowed eyes. His advisors looked to him for reaction, but he remained silent. His claws flexed slowly, watching every second of the humans' 10-minute war. The room felt colder after it ended. They should not be able to fight like that, one general whispered. But they did, another replied, and they will again. Zalcor stood slowly. Prepare the fleet. If they are rising, we will crush them before they grow stronger. And so the predators, for the first time in centuries, felt fear. Not of a weapon, not of a fleet, but of a people. A species who had stared death in the face and didn't flinch. The footage was only 10 minutes long, but that was all it took. Humanity had sent a message, and the galaxy would never forget it. Far from the silent watchers of that 10-minute footage, the war had already reached the edges of human space. On the outer rim colony of Ferris 9, alarms screamed as red skies lit up with fire. The Drakari fleet had arrived without warning. Black, warships like floating blades cutting through the atmosphere. Towers crumbled beneath orbital strikes, and defense satellites were picked off one by one. Within hours, the once bustling colony of miners, farmers, and settlers was drowning in chaos. Smoke poured from the ridge cities. Families ran for bunkers. But amid the fear, a single command beacon stayed online. Hold the line. In a command center buried under the southern mountain range, Captain Arden Voss stood at the heart of what remained of the colony's defense. Dust streaked his face, his armor was dented, and the scar down his left cheek burned with sweat. But his eyes were calm. Around him, a handful of soldiers scrambled to ready cannons, fix old drones, and reroute. Power to shield walls barely holding together. We hold until evac ships clear the sky. Arden growled, his voice low and steady. We don't run, not until everyone else is safe. His team didn't question him. They were exhausted. Some hadn't slept in over 30 hours. But they nodded, loading railguns and arming turrets as the next wave of Drakari landers broke through the clouds. These weren't scouts or skirmishers. This was a purge force, built to end resistance in one strike. Ferris 9 wasn't special. It had no secret weapon, no elite battalion. It was just a colony. But to Arden, and the people behind him, it was home, and no predator would take it without a fight. On the ridgeline, Lieutenant Sarah Hale manned the overwatch station. Her sniper rifle, a long-barreled Titan Class 7, was set up on the highest ledge. She watched through the scope as Drakari warriors exited their drop craft, towering lizard-like, beasts in segmented armor, moving in perfect formation. She marked targets quickly, her fingers moving fast. One by one, she dropped them with precise shots to their exposed joints. They're spreading out, she reported. They're not rushing us yet. Arden's voice crackled back over comms, steady and sure. Let them come. We'll make the first move. Deep beneath the mountain base, engineers worked without rest. Their job wasn't glorious, it wasn't battle, but it was survival. They kept the old systems running, fed damaged bots with fresh parts, and patched holes in the shield grid with whatever scrap they could find. Above them, the human resistance braced for impact. Explosions rocked the cliffs as Drakari cannons began their ground push. The first wave hit the outer defenses hard, plasma fire lit the air, and the front bunkers shook as their walls buckled under the pressure. But the humans inside didn't break. They held their weapons, pressed their backs to the wall, and waited. Arden led the counterstrike himself, bursting from cover with a squad of 5. They used terrain, hit-and-run tactics, and sheer audacity. One soldier took a blast to the chest, gone instantly, but Arden didn't flinch. He ripped a grenade from his belt and dove straight into a group of Drakari, taking them out with close-range fury. Sarah covered them from the high ground, her shots turning the advance into a stagger. Human drones screamed overhead, dropping EMPs and smoke clouds, scattering the enemy's vision. It was messy, fast, and brutal, but it worked. The Drakari didn't expect this much resistance. The footage hadn't lied. The humans didn't fight like prey. They fought like something far worse, something with nothing to lose. Each push by the invaders was met with a response fiercer than the last. Where the Drakari used discipline, the humans used desperation. Where the Drakari followed formation, the humans adapted mid-battle, turning wreckage into traps and craters, into kill zones. On the third wave, when the Drakari tried to flank the southern pass, they found the mountain rigged. Arden's team had buried old mining charges deep in the rocks. With a single signal, the cliffside came down. 40 enemy soldiers were crushed beneath tons of debris. Arden stood at the edge, coughing dust from his lungs. Blood ran from a cut above his eye, but he smiled. "You want a war?" he whispered. "You've got one." In orbit, the Drakari commander watched the battlefield unfold. From above, it should have looked like victory. His forces outnumbered the humans 5-1. His ships had orbital superiority. The colony was primitive by their standards. But something was wrong. His troops weren't advancing. Human resistance wasn't fading, it was rising. The more pressure they applied, the more the humans fought back. Not just with weapons, but with something deeper, something harder to understand. He replayed the footage they had intercepted days ago, the 10-minute clip of human warfare. And for the first time, he began to understand what they had missed. These creatures didn't break under fear, they became fear. And on Ferris 9, they were showing the galaxy exactly what that meant. The battle on Ferris 9 raged on, and far above in the orbiting human fleet, Admiral Kara Jensen stared out from the bridge of the flagship Valor's Edge. Her jaw was tight, her eyes sharp as she watched the blips of incoming enemy ships crowding the radar. The Drakari war fleet was massive, more ships than she had ever seen gathered in one place. Their jagged black silhouettes contrasted with the shining stars. The Council back on Earth had warned her this fight would test everything humanity had become. But Kara wasn't just a soldier. She was a leader who believed in her people and their unbreakable spirit. Her command crew bustled around her, coordinating defense protocols, launching fighter wings, and directing the orbital bombardment with precision. Yet she knew the true battle was not just above the planet, it was on the ground, where Captain Arden and his small force held the line. Communications from Ferris 9 crackled through the static-filled channels. Arden's voice, rough from exhaustion but filled with resolve, reported the relentless waves of attackers. They were holding, but barely. Kara's mind raced. Reinforcements from nearby colonies were too far to arrive in time. The only chance was to push the Drakari fleet back, to give Arden the breathing room he desperately needed. She gave the order. Deploy all fighter squadrons, harass their supply lines, cut off their reinforcements. Outside, sleek human fighters streaked into space like arrows. The Drakari fleet responded with their own aerial forces, fast, deadly, and ruthless. The sky above Ferris 9 turned into a chaotic dance of lasers, missiles, and explosions. The human pilots moved with skill, weaving through enemy fire, striking key vessels, and retreating before the Drakari could regroup. In the midst of this chaos, Kara's attention shifted to a different threat: the Vraxans. Their scouts had been monitoring the battle from afar, deciding when to strike and how to exploit any weakness. The Vraxans were cunning and cold, masters of ambush and psychological warfare. Kara's advisors warned that if the Vraxans joined, the battle could turn against humanity instantly. But for now, they held back. Below, Captain Arden led his fighters with a raw, fierce determination that seemed to inspire his troops beyond reason. Every moment was a fight for survival. Human soldiers worked in sync despite the broken lines and battered defenses. Arden's second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Hale, coordinated sniper teams and drone strikes to slow the enemy's advance. They communicated in short, sharp bursts, their voices a mix of grit and hope. The humans knew that if Ferris 9 fell, it would be more than just a loss of a colony. It would be a blow to the spirit of all human space. The Drakari commanders grew frustrated. Their overwhelming numbers and firepower should have crushed the humans long ago, yet the enemy adapted. After each assault, the humans regrouped, repaired, and fought back harder. They fought with a strength born not only from training but from a deep, burning will to survive and protect what was theirs. A sudden explosion rocked the base. Arden's comm crackled urgently. Incoming! Enemy reinforcements landing on the eastern ridge. Sarah's voice was calm but tense. I'm moving to intercept. With a nod, Arden ordered a small strike team to support her. The air filled with the sounds of battle once more. Gunfire, explosions, and cries of pain mixed with the shouts of encouragement. But the humans didn't waver. They pushed forward, using every trick in their arsenal. Arden personally led a daring charge through enemy lines, risking his own life to break the pressure on Sarah's position. Despite a wound in his shoulder, he pressed on, inspiring the soldiers around him. Meanwhile, in orbit, Admiral Kara's fighters achieved a breakthrough. They managed to destroy several key Drakari supply ships, causing confusion and hesitation in the enemy fleet. The Drakari commander's grip on the battle loosened for the first time. On the ground, this shift gave the humans precious moments to catch their breath, repair damaged equipment, and fortify their positions. Yet the battle was far from over. A new, larger Drakari wave was gathering strength, preparing for a final assault that could decide the fate of Ferris 9. Kara knew the stakes had never been higher. She sent a message to Captain Arden, her voice steady despite the tension. Hold strong. Help is coming, but you must buy time. We won't lose, Ferris 9. Arden replied with a fierce determination that echoed through the static. We will hold. For every fallen soldier, 100 more will rise. The humans were battered, bruised, and outnumbered, but never broken. As the Drakari forces massed for their final strike, the soldiers on the ground readied themselves, knowing this battle would test not only their weapons, but their souls. Somewhere deep inside, every one of them understood that they fought not just for survival, but for the future of humanity itself. The galaxy was watching. The predators thought they had the prey cornered, but the humans were about to show them what it meant to fight like no other species had before. The air was thick with tension as the final wave of Drakari forces descended on Ferris 9. Captain Arden Voss and his weary soldiers braced themselves behind hastily repaired barricades, their weapons primed, their nerves taut like bowstrings, ready to snap. The ground trembled under the pounding of heavy Drakari dropships landing troops in a relentless tide. These weren't the scattered attackers from before. This was the full might of the invaders. A flood meant to crush every human, resistance in one brutal sweep. Arden's squad locked eyes for a brief moment, sharing silent promises of courage before the order came to engage. Explosions erupted as the first shots flew. Human railguns lit up the battlefield with sharp bursts, and plasma grenades exploded among the advancing lizard-like warriors. Soldiers shouted orders, calling out fallen comrades while pushing forward despite the mounting casualties. Lieutenant Sarah Hale moved like a shadow, her sniper rifle picking off enemy commanders to throw the Drakari ranks into confusion. The humans fought with a fury born of desperation and unyielding hope. The Drakari underestimated the sheer will of these people who refused to bow. Every inch of ground was soaked with sweat and blood. As the battle grew fiercer, Arden felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, but also the fierce pride in his team's bravery. They fought, not just to survive, but to send a message to the galaxy. Humanity would not be easy prey. From the skies, human fighters streaked through enemy ships, weaving dangerous dogfights that dazzled with their speed and precision. Admiral Kara Jensen directed the orbital battle with cold determination, her voice calm over the comms despite the chaos. She coordinated waves of fighter squadrons, laser barrages, and missile strikes to disrupt the Drakari supply lines and command ships. Her tactical genius was clear as she forced the enemy fleet into a defensive posture for the first time. The Drakari commander, once confident, now bit his lip in frustration. His massive fleet was bleeding ships and resources at an alarming rate, and his ground troops were stuck in a brutal stalemate. He sent reinforcements to Ferris 9, desperate to overwhelm the stubborn humans. But the humans had one more secret, a hidden weapon buried deep beneath the colony. Arden had discovered an old research bunker from before the war, filled with forgotten tech and experimental weapons. Among the dust and rust, engineers had been working non-stop to reactivate the systems. As the battle raged above, A new sound echoed, a low hum, building into a roar. From the bunker, powerful energy cannons emerged, powered by ancient but deadly technology. Arden gave the command. The ground shook as the weapons fired, beams of pure energy slicing through the enemy ranks like scythes. Drakari soldiers screamed, as entire squads were vaporized in seconds. The sudden turn of events threw the invaders into chaos. The humans seized the moment, rallying their forces for a counterattack. Arden led a squad through the shattered lines, pushing forward with relentless drive. The clash was brutal, close quarters and violent, with sparks flying from blade and gun. Even wounded, the soldiers pressed on, fueled by hope and the determination to protect their home. Meanwhile, in orbit, Kara's forces capitalized on the disruption. Her fighter pilots pushed harder, breaking through enemy formations and targeting critical warships. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers in space, the black void illuminated by fire and destruction. The Drakari commander realized that the battle was slipping from his grasp. With mounting losses and the human defenders still holding fast, defeat loomed closer than ever before. In a desperate gamble, he ordered a retreat. But Arden's forces were not about to let the enemy go. They pursued relentlessly, cutting down escape pods and disabling fleeing ships. The cost was high, and many heroes fell that day, their sacrifices etched into the memories of the survivors. As the smoke cleared and the last Drakari ship fled beyond the atmosphere, the humans stood battered but unbeaten. Captain Arden looked around at his remaining soldiers, faces tired, wounds raw, but eyes burning with fierce pride. Admiral Kara's voice came over the comms, steady and proud. Ferris 9 holds. This victory is just the beginning. The War battle had been more than a fight for a single colony. It was a warning to the galaxy. Humans were no longer prey. They were hunters, fighters, survivors. And the predators who had come to claim them had learned a terrifying truth. They had awakened a force they could not control. The stars beyond Ferris 9 now shone with the promise of a war the universe would never forget. The calm after the storm was deceptive. The battered humans aboard the Valor's Edge and the scattered survivors on Ferris 9 could taste victory, but the war was far from over. Captain Arden and Admiral Kara both knew that the Drakari would not retreat quietly. The enemy was powerful, ruthless, and now driven by the bitter sting of defeat. Meanwhile, whispers came through intercepted transmissions about the Vraxins, those shadowy aliens who had observed the battle from a distance and now considered intervening. The Vraxins were cunning and patient predators, and their involvement would change the war in unpredictable ways. In the dim glow of the command center, Kara's fingers danced across the control panels as she prepared for the next move. She ordered scouts to hunt for the Drakari fleet's hidden bases, while engineers worked on repairing the Valor's Edge's critical systems. Every crew member knew the battle had taken a heavy toll, but their spirits burned bright. Arden's team was rebuilding on Ferris 9, setting up defenses and treating the wounded. He moved among his soldiers with steady determination, refusing to let despair take root. The humans had something the alien forces didn't understand, a deep connection to their home, a fierce loyalty to each other and a willingness to fight even when hope seemed thin. But the enemy was regrouping fast. The Drakari had reinforcements gathering in a nearby system, waiting for the right moment to strike back with overwhelming force. Knowing this, Arden suggested a bold plan, a swift strike to cripple their staging ground before the new fleet could launch. Kara agreed, and they began to prepare a daring assault far behind enemy lines. The tension on the Valor's Edge was palpable. Pilots trained relentlessly, weapon systems were fine-tuned, and spies gathered intel on the Drakari's defenses. Arden personally reviewed the plans with his trusted officers, focusing on the risks and the slim chance of success. Yet, the humans were used to fighting against impossible odds. As the fleet jumped into hyperspace toward the enemy's staging system, the stars outside blurred into streaks of light. The silence of space was broken only by the quiet hum of engines and the steady beat of human resolve. Upon arrival, the humans saw a massive Drakari assembly. Hundreds of ships docked and war machines gathering like a sleeping giant ready to awake. The human fleet moved quickly, launching fighters and bombers in coordinated waves. The first strikes hit with devastating precision, destroying key supply ships and disabling repair docks. The Drakari were caught off guard, their sprawling base rocked by explosions and fire. Yet the enemy's defense was fierce, with automated turrets and elite troops rushing to repel the attackers. The battle descended into chaos, both in space and on the surface. Human marines dropped onto the planet's surface, fighting in narrow canyons and ruined cities. Arden led a squad through winding streets, facing the terrifying Drakari warriors in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Despite their alien strength and sharp claws, the humans fought with grit and clever tactics. Arden's leadership shone brightest in these moments, inspiring his soldiers to press forward when retreat seemed safer. Back in orbit, Kara's pilots danced through deadly enemy fire, dodging plasma blasts and missile barrages to protect their troops and strike at vital targets. The Drakari commander struggled to coordinate his scattered forces, his frustration growing as his well-planned defenses crumbled. But the humans paid a heavy price. Ships were lost, brave pilots and soldiers fell, and the strain of relentless combat wore on their bodies and minds. Still, they pushed on, refusing to give ground. In the darkest hours, a distress call came from one of the human squads pinned behind enemy lines. Arden didn't hesitate. He led a risky rescue mission through enemy territory, navigating mines and ambushes to save the trapped soldiers. The mission was a success but left him wounded and exhausted. Yet even as pain throbbed in his side, Arden's spirit remained unbroken. His people needed him alive, strong, and ready for the final fight. As the battle on the enemy world reached its climax, the humans managed to cripple the Drakari's fleet production facilities, turning the tide once again. The invaders were forced into retreat, limping away under constant fire. The Vraxans, watching from their hidden vantage point, finally decided to act. Their ships appeared like dark shadows at the edge of the battle, their motives unknown and their power fearsome. The humans now faced a new threat that might eclipse even the Drakari's fury. But Arden and Kara prepared to meet it head-on. The fight for survival was far from over, but humanity had proven once again they were not prey. They were warriors, fierce, united, and ready to face whatever darkness awaited in the stars. The arrival of the Vraxan fleet shattered the fragile calm that had settled after the battle with the Drakari. Their ships moved silently and deliberately through space, dark and sleek, unlike anything the humans had ever faced before. Captain, Arden felt a chill as the warning alarms blared across the Valor's edge. The Vraxans were not just another enemy. They were hunters of legends, cold, ruthless, and masters of stealth and psychological warfare. The humans had no time to recover. From the last fight before this new threat demanded their full attention, Admiral Kara gathered her officers, her face grim but determined as she outlined the grim reality. The Vraxans' technology was advanced beyond anything humanity had encountered. Their ships cloaked in layers of energy that made them nearly invisible to sensors. Worse, they communicated in ways that disrupted human systems, forcing the fleet into tight defensive formations. The tension was thick as the Valor's edge led the fleet into a defensive posture, ready for what was coming. On the surface of Ferris 9, the soldiers prepared for an inevitable strike. Captain Arden, despite his wounds, took charge of coordinating the planetary defenses, using every resource at his disposal to strengthen their positions. Every inch of ground was fortified, and every soldier drilled to respond instantly. The Vraxan ships began probing attacks, testing human defenses with swift surgical strikes. Their tactics were precise and merciless, hit and vanish before the humans could respond. Human pilots, though brave and skilled, found themselves outmatched in the vastness of space. The loss of a few fighters to the Vraxans' shadowy weapons sent waves of unease through the fleet, yet the humans refused to give in to fear. Arden and Kara pushed their teams harder, innovating and adapting faster than anyone expected. Engineers scrambled to develop countermeasures to the Vraxan stealth technology. Pilots learned new evasive maneuvers, turning the deadly dance of space combat into a game of skill and willpower. On Ferris 9, Arden's ground forces clashed, with Vraxan raiding parties, sleek alien warriors wielding strange weapons that tore through human armor, but were countered by human ingenuity and raw determination. Each firefight was brutal and exhausting. Soldiers lost friends and comrades, yet their resolve never wavered. The humans fought not just for survival, but for the right to exist on their own terms. The Vraxans, intrigued and frustrated by humanity's tenacity, began to focus their efforts on psychological warfare. They hacked human communications, spreading false information and sowing doubt among the ranks. Arden and Kara faced moments of bitter frustration as rumors and fear threatened to undermine their efforts. Still, their leadership held firm, rallying their people with honest words and unbreakable spirit. During one desperate moment when a vital outpost on Ferris 9 was overrun, Arden led a daring counterattack with a small force of veterans. Moving through smoke and ruin, they pushed back the enemy, reclaiming the position against overwhelming odds. This victory became a symbol of hope, a beacon that rallied the human defenders across the system. As the battle stretched on, anew, hope emerged from an unexpected source. Drakari prisoners captured during the earlier fights. Some of these alien warriors had begun to question their leader's cruel tactics and whispered to Arden about a possible alliance against the greater threat of the Vraxans. It was a dangerous gamble, but with careful negotiation and mutual respect, a fragile truce was formed. Together, humans and dissident Drakari forces planned to confront the Vraxans, combining their strengths to survive. The stage was set for a clash that would decide the fate of the system, and perhaps the galaxy itself. Arden and Kara stood side by side, aware that the coming battle would test everything they had fought for. The humans had faced predators before, but now they were facing the hunters of hunters. The fight would be fierce, costly, and terrifying. Yet, through the pain and sacrifice, one truth shone bright. Humanity's heart beat strong and fearless. In the silence before the storm, the stars above Ferris 9 seemed to watch, waiting for the next chapter of a war that would echo through time. And humanity, battered but unbroken, prepared to show the galaxy why they were never meant to be prey. The moment the combined human and dissident Drakari fleet emerged from hyperspace above Ferris 9, the vastness of space erupted into chaos. The Vraxan armada was waiting, a dark and deadly storm swirling with sharp-edged ships that moved with unnatural speed and precision. Captain Arden gripped the railing of the Valor's Edge, his eyes fixed on the enemy lines. He could feel the weight of every soul counting on him. The fighters in the cockpits, the Marines on the planet, and the countless civilians who had fled to safety, but whose homes and futures rested on this battle. Admiral Kara's voice cut through the tense silence, steady and commanding as she gave orders to form the assault formation. The humans and their uneasy Drakari allies moved as one, weaving through clouds of laser fire and missile barrages that lit up the black canvas of space. The Vraxans were ruthless, their ships struck with deadly accuracy, tearing through smaller vessels and forcing the human fleet into desperate evasions. Yet the humans fought with a wildfire that refused to die. Arden's fighter squadron led the charge, darting through enemy lines, targeting the Vraxan command ships. Pilots called out their kills, voices full of adrenaline and hope, each victory a small step toward turning the tide. On Ferris 9's surface, the ground battle raged as well. Human and Drakari forces moved through the shattered cities, battling Vraxan raiders who used guerrilla tactics and advanced weaponry. The clash was brutal and close, no longer fought from the safety of space but face to face, where courage, skill, and sheer will made all the difference. Arden's team cleared out enemy positions one by one, sometimes falling back only to come together and push forward harder. Kara coordinated the fleet's efforts with precision, her mind racing to anticipate every Vraxan move. She ordered electronic countermeasures to jam enemy sensors, bought time for human bombers to strike at the heart of the Vraxan formation, and kept the fleet's morale steady through her calm, unwavering leadership. But the Vraxans were cunning. They unleashed a terrifying new weapon, an energy wave that disabled whole sections of the human fleet, plunging ships into darkness and chaos. Panic rippled through the ranks. Arden's ship was caught in the blast, systems flickering and alarms blaring. Yet, even as his control panel sparked, Arden refused to give in. He rallied his crew, worked with the engineers to reroute power, and guided the Valor's Edge back into the fight. The battle reached a fever pitch. The skies above Ferris 9 were a storm of explosions and fire. The humans fought with everything they had, knowing the future of their species depended on this moment. The Drakari, once merciless enemies, now fought beside them with equal ferocity, their claws and plasma weapons cutting through the Vraxan forces. Then came the turning point. Arden led a risky, daring assault directly into the core of the Vraxan command fleet. The fighters tore through heavy defenses, dodging beams of crushing energy and bursts of missile fire. Arden's ship broke through the outer line, targeting the flagship's power core. The explosion was cataclysmic, lighting up the void with a brilliant flare that shook even the nearby vessels. The Vraxan fleet faltered. Their ships, losing coordination, began to fall back. The humans pressed their advantage, pushing the enemy into retreat. But victory was costly. Many brave souls were lost in the fierce fighting, and the Valor's Edge was heavily damaged, barely holding together. As the dust settled, Arden and Kara met in the ship's command center, their faces tired but triumphant. They knew the battle was won, but the war was far from over. The Vraxans might retreat, but they would return. Still, humanity had proven something powerful. No matter the enemy, no matter the odds, they would stand and fight, turning the hunters into the hunted. Their unity, their courage, and their relentless spirit had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. And as the stars around Ferris 9 flickered back to their quiet glow, the message was clear. Humanity was no longer prey. They were the apex predators, ready to defend their home and their future with all they had. The silence after the battle was almost deafening. The stars above Ferris 9 twinkled quietly, as if holding their breath after the storm that had raged across their skies. Captain Arden stood on the battered bridge of the Valor's Edge, staring out at the wreckage floating in space. The once proud fleet was broken but not defeated. Wounded ships drifted in the void, their crews scrambling to repair damage and prepare for whatever might come next. The Vraxans had vanished into the darkness, retreating to lick their wounds. But Arden knew this was only a pause in the war, a breath before the next storm. Below on Ferris 9, the ground forces began their slow, painful work of rebuilding. Cities lay in ruins, streets torn apart by fire and battle. Soldiers helped civilians salvage what they could, sharing rations and tending to the injured. The cost had been high, too high, but the spirit of humanity burned brighter than ever. Arden walked through the makeshift camp where weary soldiers gathered, their faces tired but filled with quiet pride. They had faced the impossible and survived. In the command center, Admiral Kara coordinated with Drakari leaders, discussing plans for a lasting alliance. The fragile peace between former enemies was a testament to how much things had changed. What had started as a desperate struggle for survival had grown into something new: hope. The Drakari who once fought alongside humans were no longer just allies of convenience but partners bound by a shared goal. Together they would face the galaxy's darkness. But Arden's mind lingered on what had been learned from the fight. The footage captured during the battles, the 10 minutes of war that had spread across the galaxy, had shattered old myths about humanity. Other species who had once seen humans as weak, primitive, or prey now understood the truth. Humans were fierce, inventive, and relentless. The galaxy was watching, and the message was clear: underestimate humanity at your own peril. Yet despite the victory, Arden knew that the fight would never truly end. New threats lurked in the shadows of space, waiting for a chance to strike. The Vraxans were just the beginning, but humanity had changed. They had tasted war and found strength in their unity and their will to survive. Every victory and every loss forged them into something greater, a force that would not be broken. The final moments of the story unfolded with a quiet ceremony on Ferris 9. Soldiers and civilians gathered to honor those who had fallen. The air was heavy with grief and pride. Arden spoke, his voice steady as he promised that their sacrifices would never be forgotten. Their fight was not just for survival, but for the future of all humanity. As he looked up at the stars, Arden saw more than cold lights in the distance. He saw a galaxy full of possibilities, a universe waiting for humans to carve their place in it. The war footage that had terrified the predators had changed everything. It had turned fear into respect and enemies into allies, and it had awakened a new dawn for humanity, one where they were no longer hunted but hunters themselves, ready to face whatever the stars might throw at them with courage, hope, and unbreakable strength. The story ended not with the sound of final victory, but with the quiet promise of resilience, a promise that humanity would always rise no matter the darkness ahead.